and love your neighbor as yourself. He is quoting two commands from the Old Testament. He's quoting Deuteronomy chapter 6 verse 5, and he's quoting Leviticus chapter 19 verse 18 that says, do not seek revenge or bear a grudge against one of your people, but love your neighbor as yourself. I am the Lord. You have answered correctly, Jesus replied. Do this and you'll live. Now, Jesus not only is affirming the man's answer, but if you go to Matthew, there's a story in which Jesus himself says, when an expert asks him, Jesus, what's the greatest commandment? Jesus says essentially the same thing. To love the Lord your God with all your heart. That was the great Shema of Israel. Every devout Jew got up in the morning and said it, and before they went to bed in the evening, they said the great Shema of Israel. Love the Lord your God with all your heart and with all your mind and with all your soul. They also went on, by the way, to say that they were thankful to God that God hadn't made them a Gentile or a woman. But we won't go into that part. But these people knew that the greatest command was to love God. And they knew it was also very important to love the neighbor. Now, I want to contend that we have done a very good job in loving God in as much as we have done a good job in proclaiming the good news and hearing the good news. I don't think we are yet doing a very good job in doing those good deeds of service. And I think there's a reason for it. One of the things that many conservative churches have shied away from in terms of getting involved in things in the community is what happened back in the late 50s and early 60s, and it was what was called the social gospel, where a lot of the liberal churches were saying, well, it really doesn't matter so much what you believe. It doesn't matter if you believe that Jesus was born of a virgin. It doesn't matter. What matters is what are you doing in the communities. And so we didn't want to stray from orthodoxy and get involved in these things, so we just didn't get involved in the social aspect. But the teaching is really clear. We are not only to be loving God, but we're to be loving our neighbor as ourselves. And this expert in the law says, okay, Jesus, who's my neighbor? If I have to love my neighbor as myself, who's my neighbor? And that's when Jesus told the parable of the Good Samaritan. You know the parable. A good guy, devout Jew, is on his way down the road from Jericho to Jerusalem. He gets hit by a bunch of robbers and left, and a priest comes by, doesn't do anything. A Levite comes by, doesn't do anything. And then along comes a lowly, despised Samaritan. That would be like being out in Colorado or Arizona and saying, along came an Indian. That would be like being in the South and saying, along came a black person. Are you with me? And that person, that Samaritan, cared for the person, touched, bandaged the bloody wounds, put him on his own animal, took the animal and the person on the animal along with him to an inn, got him there, got him care, agreed to pay for whatever was done. Jesus said, which of these do you think was the neighbor? The expert in the law couldn't even say the Samaritan. He said, the one who had mercy. Now, the meaning of the parable is quite clear. We are the neighbor when we act in a neighborly way. And the neighborly way to act is to care, to do some very hands-on, physical kinds of things and show care. I want to tell you today, people don't care how much you know until they know how much you care. We had a guy stop yesterday up on Route 1, pull in and offer some cushions, the rubber cushions out of a couch. He said he's been doing roofing for years and he's found out on steep roofs like that if you sit on that cushion, it'll keep you from sliding because there's that much more rubberized surface that helps you not slide down the roof. And then he said, aren't you all the same crew that was working in St. Anne back in the spring helping that lady with her porch? And I said, yeah, I'm the minister of the church and we're all just here volunteering. He said, can I come back and help too? I said, yeah. He went and got his tools. He came back and talk about a tremendous help. But did you hear the witness in there? Aren't you all the same group that was down there doing some work? Not passing out tracts. You see, sometimes we miss out on that part of it. And that comes in the great example, Jesus himself, the last part of this. In Luke chapter 9, Luke tells of a time when the crowds were following Jesus, and Jesus had sent the 70 out. They had gone out witnessing and proclaiming the good news and doing deeds of service, and they had come back in. And this crowd is following Jesus. And here's what Luke 9 says, down about verse 11. He welcomed them and spoke to them about the kingdom of God, the good news, and healed those who needed healing, the good deeds of service. Listen to me. Engaging the community with good news and good deeds isn't just a good tactic. It's not just a good evangelistic program to start. It is the foundational description of what we are to be as the church. Telling the message of good news and doing acts of good service. Listen to the words of Isaiah chapter 58. This is an important chapter. It's a chapter that Jesus often quoted. Chapters 58 to 68 to 66 of Isaiah are dealing with God's final purposes of both judgment and salvation, and thus it's there to make us aware of both His justice and His grace. And in this chapter, the beginning of chapter 58, here's what Isaiah says. Shout it aloud, don't hold back. Here's the good news. Raise your voice like a trumpet. Declare to my people their rebellion, and to the house of Jacob their sins. For day after day they seek me out. They seem eager to know my ways, as if they were a nation that does what is right, and has not forsaken the commands of God. They ask me for just decisions, and seem eager for God to come near them. Why have we fasted, they say, and you have not seen it? Why have we humbled ourselves and you have not noticed? Isaiah is saying to the nation of Israel, You've come and worshipped, you've come and you've raised your voices, you've come and you've fasted, you've come and you've given, but God's not pleased. God's not happy. Verse 3 as I continue, yet on your day of fasting, you do as you please and exploit all your workers. Your fasting ends in quarreling and strife and in striking each other with wicked fists. You cannot fast as you do today and expect your voice to be heard on high. You've been there. I've been there. Congregations that meet for worship. One church that I know of where the elder who sat on one side of the communion table and the other elder on the other side of the communion table didn't speak to each other for years. Come to worship every Sunday. Come and raise our voices in song. Come and pray. Come and read the Word. But God's not pleased. Why? Well, Isaiah says, why? Verse 6. Is this not the kind of fasting I have chosen? To loose the chains of injustice and untie the cords of the yoke, to set oppressed free and break every yoke? Is it not to share your food with the hungry, to provide the poor wanderer with shelter? When you see the naked, to clothe them, and not to turn away from your own flesh and blood? What does God want? He wants people who are willing to set free the oppressed, to share food with the hungry, to provide shelter for the homeless, to clothe the naked. In other words, if we want God to accept our acts of worship, then we better be trying to do what is right. Now, I want to ask you, doesn't that sound awfully like the judgment story of Jesus in Matthew 25? When the sheep are separated from the goats, and the sheep basically want to know, hey, why are we over here? And Jesus said, because I was hungry and you gave me something to eat. I was thirsty and you gave me something to drink. I was naked and you clothed me. I was in prison and you visited me. And they said, Lord, when did we do that unto you? Now you know the answer. What did He say? Even when you do it to the least of these, you've done it unto me. See, this is a message of Isaiah. It's a message of Jesus. And I want you to know today, this is the purpose and the focus of the church. To be telling the good news, but to be preparing people for the good news by doing good deeds of service. Now, Ron, are you really hungry today, or are you okay? Here's why I ask. Isn't it sometimes hard to hear the message when your stomach's growling really, really loud? You see, when Jesus saw hungry people, He knew there wasn't any sense in preaching that message out to them. They were hungry. They needed to be fed. And we have a lot of people around us that probably would be open to hearing the Word of God if we did a little bit more to help them with their hurts and their pains and their hungers and their oppressions and their addictions. And are you with me? Now, here's where I want to end. I don't know if you're familiar with Scott Beck. Scott Beck was the first person to have a franchise, and eventually he became the chief operating officer of Blockbuster Video. He happens to be a Christian man. He was speaking to a bunch of ministry leaders one time. And one of the leaders asked him, what does it take to launch a venture, to get it off the ground? And here is Scott's answer. Critical mass is one person with a vision. One person with a vision. Now let's bring this home. We had a vacation Bible school this summer one day. And it was great. We had a great turnout. We were able to tell kids about Jesus Christ after we fed them and let them have some fun and play. How did that start? One person with a vision who said something to somebody else, and all of a sudden they got excited about it too, and before long, 3 or 4 talking, and the end result was we ministered. Right? Here's my question. Since changing our vision is about perspective and about purpose, is it possible that you